This is a 6-part series designed to help you prevent sexual harassment in your workplace. By engaging in this training, you are taking your first steps to being a helpful bystander who is ready to respond to any sexual harassment that you might observe. This training will prepare you to respond quickly and appropriately to sexual harassment so that you can contribute to making your workplace a positive place for everyone. Welcome to Sexual Harassment Prevention. This is Module 1. What is sexual harassment? Everyone wants to feel respected and safe at work, but when an employee experiences sexual harassment, their sense of respect and safety is violated. So what is sexual harassment exactly? Commonly, sexual harassment includes sexual advances, touching, and groping. It also includes things that may be less obvious, like lewd jokes, comments, and gestures. Complicating this is that sometimes people in power don't recognize when they're abusing it. Conversely, sometimes people without power are reluctant to speak up for fear of the consequences. Today's training will help you identify unprofessional and bothersome behaviors that could become illegal sexual harassment if left unchecked. Additionally, we'll discuss techniques you can use to respond to harassing behavior to keep your workplace respectful and safe. What comes to mind when you hear the term sexual harassment? For many, it's the image of a man using his position of power to pursue, pressure, or objectify a woman in the workplace. In reality, sexual harassment is a complex issue faced by both men and women. We can all agree that abuses of power are wrong. For instance, it is wrong for someone in charge of a company's finances to abuse that power by embezzling funds from the organization. It is also wrong for someone with power over coworkers or subordinates to subject them to unwanted sexual or disrespectful behaviors. Taking a look back, sexual harassment has been prohibited in the workplace since the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Since then, the law has been clarified to outline 2 types of illegal harassment. The first type is a hostile work environment, which occurs when there's ongoing or pervasive negative behavior created essentially by anyone in the organization. The other type deals with people trying to use their situation to get something in return. That's called quid pro quo. You may have heard the term, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Those types of exchanges can constitute harassment. The EEOC defines sexual harassment as unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature or based on a person's sex. It's recognized as a form of sexual discrimination, and it is prohibited under both federal law and many state laws. These laws are continually improving and changing. The reason is that sexual harassment remains an issue in the workplace.
Hey, I was wondering, you look good as a woman. Did you have the surgery too?
It's none of your business.
There are gray areas when it comes to sexual harassment, meaning sometimes it's subjective. Behaviors that are acceptable in one work group could be offensive and threatening in another. That's why communication skills are so important. They allow employees to talk about professionalism at work. Conflict management skills may also be necessary if talking turns to serious conversations. It's stereotypical that sexual harassment is the mean old boss hitting on his young secretary. In actuality, harassment can happen in all working relationships. That doesn't just mean employees and supervisors or something between coworkers. It can also involve clients and vendors from outside the organization, or even job applicants. That means that anyone can become the target of unprofessional behavior. 1 in every 6 complaints filed by the EEOC is by a man. They may be harassed by women or other men. Gender does not determine who conducts harassment or gets harassed. And just like the fact that anyone can be a target, sexual harassment can happen anytime or anywhere. It can cross professional and personal boundaries, on or off site, during or after work. Sexual harassment doesn't have to be a face-to-face interaction. For instance, harassment can happen on the phone. It can also happen in emails, text messages, and social media. Plus, you don't have to be the target of harassment to be affected by harassment. If you see or hear someone being mistreated, witnessing it can be considered harassment as well. Embarrassment, fear of disapproval, the potential loss of business, not knowing proper procedures, or a fear of retaliation are some of the reasons people choose not to report harassment. Victims may hope it just goes away, so they may react by ignoring it. As bystanders, we can support victims of sexual harassment by informing them of their options and encouraging them to report it. It's important to get sexual harassment reported and stopped, because if left unchecked, sexual harassment can have severe and long-term consequences for victims, as well as harassers, bystanders, and the companies they work in. Specifically, victims can suffer from decreased morale and lowered self-esteem. That can translate to reduced productivity, increased absences, and increased rates of quitting or resigning. There are even physical ramifications like decreased physical and psychological well-being, as well as increased stress. And for some people, it doesn't just end when the harassment stops. Some victims can even develop PTSD, which is a very serious post-traumatic stress disorder. But sexual harassment does more than negatively affect the person being harassed. Teamwork and workplace morale also suffer. On top of the toxic work environment harassment creates, it also negatively affects the company itself by decreasing productivity through lost work time and higher turnover. Plus, there are expenses like court and potential settlement costs. And once all that is done, you're left with a bad reputation for the work group and company as a whole. Bystanders may observe sexual harassment in many forms. Legal definitions of sexual harassment can help us recognize when behavior is legally actionable and calls for you to step in. As we touched on earlier, there are two types of sexual harassment. The first is quid pro quo. It's a Latin term meaning one thing for another. When we use the term under the heading of sexual harassment, it basically means offers of work benefits in exchange for sexual favors. But it can also mean threats of consequences for the refusal to perform those sexual favors. Examples of this include, say, offering a promotion or raise for sexual favors, or threatening demotion or transfer to undesirable conditions in exchange for a date or two. It could even be as severe as firing an employee for refusing sexual advances or for ending a relationship. Now let's take a look at this example.
Just came by to check on your progress.
I'm almost done.
Looks like you got a lot finished.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, why don't you knock off for the evening? Come on out for a drink with me.
No, thanks.
We'll have a good time and see what happens.
No, really, I'm not interested.
All right, be that way. Tell you what, get these done tonight before you go home, or you're fired.
You can't do this kind of stuff to me.
This type of behavior in our workplace makes everyone uncomfortable. And let's not forget, it's illegal. It's clear that putting a person's job in jeopardy to receive some sexual favor is abusive, but it is still sexual harassment even when minor rewards or favors are offered in exchange for something less than out-and-out intercourse. For example, doing a coworker a favor in exchange for going out on a date. It might surprise you that this can still be harassment, even if the date request is welcome. If you're interested in starting a relationship with a coworker, the best bet is to avoid making offers that are related to some work benefit or threat. Beyond being exceedingly tacky, offers like that are strictly prohibited. Where it can get a little murky is when two people have unequal power because favors can be implied instead of being spelled out as before. If the person with the offer doesn't directly offer an exchange, if they make a sexual advance, the benefit or threat is still implied because they have the power to make it happen. A hostile work environment is an unwelcoming or threatening environment because of inappropriate conduct, sexual behavior, or gender-based discrimination. This is generally created by continual misbehavior. Telling frequent lewd jokes or repeatedly asking out a coworker can create this type of environment. Other verbal ways include playing songs with lyrics that make coworkers uncomfortable, or making repeated inappropriate comments that a reasonable person would find offensive. There are nonverbal ways to create a hostile work environment as well. Things like inappropriate pictures or repeatedly staring at a coworker can make people uncomfortable and workplaces hostile. Even more obvious behaviors like sending sexually explicit text messages, emails, social media posts, or displaying or playing explicit content on your computer is strictly prohibited. Touching or groping coworkers is a quick way to create a hostile work environment physically. This can include giving unwanted hugs or putting an arm around someone you only know professionally. Clearly, some of these examples really only impact the target, but others can also negatively affect anyone in the area that might see or hear what's happening. That said, all of these have the potential to cause problems in the workplace. Crossing the line from welcome to unwelcome behavior is asking for trouble. So now that we've talked about the actions that can be considered legal harassment, let's talk about the things that might be considered uninvited. Small missteps, if tolerated, could send the signal that they're okay in the workplace, and eventually could lead to a hostile work environment. That's why early bystander intervention is so important in maintaining a healthy work environment. Assuming they're not regular occurrences, things like patting a coworker on the shoulder for a job well done, asking a coworker out on a date one time, or making a single out-of-character joke may make people uncomfortable, even if that's not the intent. Just because these actions might not fit the legal definition of sexual harassment, they still may not be welcomed by others. They can cause discomfort when directed towards someone who doesn't appreciate them, or when others who are nearby witness them. Actions like those listed may also be prohibited by your company and lead to disciplinary actions. Those same scenarios do become harassment when a harasser persists, like patting a coworker on the shoulder after repeatedly being told to stop, or if the harasser continues to ask for dates, even after the coworker has clearly said no. If a person makes multiple offensive jokes, that behavior may be identified as sexual harassment. So, sexual harassment is unwelcome, sexually or gender-based behavior directed at any individual. Harassment affects everyone in a negative way. The decrease in morale and teamwork that harassment causes means both individuals and the organization suffer. Most interactions in the workplace are professional and acceptable. The key to determining if they are appropriate is to make sure everyone views them as welcome. And as a conscious bystander, be prepared to take action against any unwelcome behavior.